Hey freaks, it's JJ. Welcome to my channel. Today we're talking about Unleash the Archers and their concept album, Apex. So this was a video that was suggested through my suggestion box, so shout out to Max for suggesting this video. Thank you so much, and I'm really excited to cover this topic and talk about this band in this album. But if you guys want to request videos that you want to see from me, then go down to the link in the description linked to my metalhead community and join my email list. From there you'll be able to suggest videos that you want to see from me. Just add your name to the suggestion that you leave and I will give you a shout out. So for now, a lot of my videos I'm probably going to draw mostly from that suggestion box. But also feel free to suggest videos you want to see from me down in the comments as well. But anyway, let's talk about Apex. So Brittany Slayes, obviously the front woman for this band, has come out with a series of 3 videos where she goes track by track talking about the concept behind this album. So since she's already explained the concept, and it's obviously way better to hear the concept explained from the original source, the person who created it, I didn't want to do just a plain track by track explanation of this because it would obviously just not be as good as her explanation. And she covers a lot of cool things. So I kind of wanted to talk about the concept. I kind of wanted to talk about this concept from a writer's perspective and how you go about writing a concept album. Because I think they did a very great job creating this concept and how well it goes with the music and just good storytelling in general. So I'm going to treat this kind of more a little bit more like a review for the whole process of writing a concept album as far as the storyline goes. Because I am a writer, so I've kind of studied, concept album writing. I mean, I've also tried to write a concept album in a novel type prose as well. I've been working with a band for writing a concept for them, so I'll talk about that. That's not quite ready to talk about that just yet. But it is very exciting, and I do have some experience sort of in this realm, at least from a hobbyist perspective. So yeah, I'm just going to be talking about how much I like this album and how great of a job I think the whole band did in creating this album, and especially Brittany Slayes. Let me just talk a bit for a second. Watching her videos where she's explaining the concept behind this album, I just loved watching her so much because she's just such a kindred spirit to me. She's sitting in front of all these amazing fantasy bookshelf, and I'm like, oh, I've read that one. I was getting distracted from what she was saying because I was just looking at all the books on her bookshelf and be like, oh yeah, that's a great book as well. And I don't know, I just felt I don't know, she's awesome, and I love how she's, this commanding female power presence on the stage, but then she's in front of the camera, she's kind of awkward in an endearing way. But yeah, I just know how to spot another nerd when I see one, so cheers to Brittany Slayes, she's awesome. Anyway, so I couldn't really adequately talk about this without giving, a quick little description of the storyline. After you watch this video, if you have not watched Brittany Slayes' videos talking about this concept, I suggest you do so, because she gives a really great in-depth explanation of each song track by track. But basically the story is that there's this hero character. He is called the Immortal, and he is kind of asleep in this mountain. And then whoever wants to wake him up, he then becomes a slave to whoever awakens him from his slumber in this mountain. And he has to do whatever that person says. So this villain type character, which is the matriarch, and she's very powerful and, corrupt in a way in that she just wants to have eternal life and have ultimate power, basically. She wakes up the Immortal and she uses him as her slave in order to achieve immortality. And so the way that she's going to achieve immortality is that she has to do this crazy ritual on this certain night, by the time all these planets align and all this cosmic stuff aligns. She needs to kill all 4 of her sons in this ritual, and so she does that, then she achieves immortality and she becomes the most powerful being, in this fantasy realm that they've created. So basically that's the kind of the basic premise there. In this immortal character is forced to do the bidding of this matriarch, this evil woman. And so he goes about finding each of her sons, and he has to kill each one of them, and he has to bring each one of them to the matriarch, where she sacrifices them in this bloody ritual type thing. all the while he's doing this for this matriarch, she kind of promises him that if he does all this, then he will be released and freed, and he won't have to go back to the mountain and suffer this kind of endless cycle of being awoken to do someone's bidding and then go back into the mountain to sleep for, you know, another 1,000 years or whatever. So she promises to free him, but by the end, you know, once he's accomplished bringing all 4 of her sons, and, you know, this lady's achieved this power, she, of course, you know, reneges on her promise, and she forces him to go back to the mountain, and does not, in fact, free him. And so that's basically, in a nutshell, the kind of shortened summary of this concept album. So one of the things that's really cool about this concept is that it's definitely built with the correct story structure. So if you study, if you look at, you know, writing novels, or, you know, just writing stories in general, like for screenplays and such, there's kind of a structure that is built into place, which over, you know, hundreds and hundreds of years, we as the human race has kind of refined to the point where we have this structure that if you follow it, you're able to impact the audience and the viewer in the best way. Like, you'll have the most impact on your audience if you kind of follow the structure. So the story is definitely built with that structure intact, and I think that's one of the things that makes this concept so powerful and effective. And so I don't know if Brittany Slades has, like, studied storytelling, or, you know, or story structure, or she's just read so many books that she's kind of just internalized it subconsciously, and she kind of just inherently knows how to write a good story. But I kind of wanted to point out all the different things that she's doing, which I think is really cool. So first of all, when you want to tell a story, you usually start with your main protagonist. So you open up with the scene of this protagonist and kind of what their natural status is wherever they're at currently, so that you can contrast it to wherever they're going to go during the course of the story. So usually they start out in one place, and through the course of the story they end up in a whole other place, psychologically, physically, and emotionally. So she did a great job in establishing this character, his backstory, where he's from in, like, the first track. Also, at the same time, you know, within the first 10% of a story, you typically want to have some kind of, like, inciting incident that will launch the rest of the story into action. So the first track accomplishes all of this, and it also has the inciting incident, which is the immortal getting woken up from his slumber in this mountain. And then in the following track, it has a good way of establishing who this character is, and, you know, what kind of hints out the journey to come. And so it's this sense of, like, foreboding and this deep, ominous sort of feeling that evokes is really good in setting the scenery and setting the tone for the rest of the story. And, like, where are we going to go on this? It's not going to be like a happy-go-lucky adventure, you know, it's going to be something very dark and ominous. And so setting that tone and establishing the character, where they're from, and probably hinting at where they're going to go is a really great job is really effective in showing the difference from where the character started out versus where they're going to end up by the end. So the next 2 tracks, The Matriarch and Cleanse the Bloodlines, introduce this, like, designing principle, which is what they call it, which is what John Truby calls it in one of his books, but about screenwriting. But basically, it introduces the main plot point, where it's like, if you were to give an elevator pitch of this story, you would want to explain what is going to drive the story forward. And so what drives the story forward is that you have this evil villain who wants to accomplish this task, and the way she's going to accomplish it is she is using this immortal that she awoke in order to get all 4 of her sons so she can complete this ritual to become immortal. So that's what we call the design principle, and that's how you know that this is going to be a story worth sticking around for. Kind of setting the bar and kind of explaining up front what this story is going to be about, setting the tone like I talked about, and just kind of creating some expectations for your audience, and then following through with those expectations is important when writing a story. Whew, okay, I have to take a breather because I'm talking way too fast. If you haven't hit subscribe already, then please do that if you want to support me and what I do here. Also, leave me a comment too if you are understanding everything I'm saying, or if I'm just talking total nonsense, which could very well be the case if I'm just, like, getting too technical with this whole storytelling thing, and you're like, hold up. If you're also, like, a writer too, and you like metal music and you're a writer, then you and I are, like, got a lot in common, so let me know down in the comments if that's you. Okay, back to the story. So the next few tracks, we see this protagonist, the Immortal, going about and accomplishing these goals. And so he goes to the oldest son, who's like this corrupt politician, and he brings him to the matriarch, and she kills him. And then he goes to the second oldest son, who's this crazy sorcerer / priest type person who's like leading this cult and corrupting all these people. And so then he captures that son and brings him to the matriarch. She kills him. And then when we get to like the next son, who is like the leader of the matriarch's like armies and stuff, and so he fights him, and then he brings him to the matriarch, and she kills him. Blah blah blah. So this is what we call kind of like the fun and games area of a story, which is going to make up a bulk of the story. Which is it's titled Fun and Games, but it's usually not very fun, and it's usually not a lot of games. It's basically, things are being accomplished in the story. So another brilliant thing that Brittany's done in writing this story is creating a sense of progress in the story. So a lot of the times, sometimes you'll read a story and you're like, a lot of things have happened, but I don't really feel satisfied with what's happened. Like, a lot of stuff has happened, but it feels just kind of like it's just a bunch of stuff. Like, where are we going? How have we accomplished anything? So, if you're if the audience is left unsure whether or not the protagonist is accomplishing their goals, and they don't feel any sense of progress towards the plot, then they're going to feel dissatisfied. So, by setting out a number of characters that this Immortal has to defeat, essentially, is a good way of kind of signposting to your reader or your listener or your audience that progress is happening. That he's not just dilly-dallying in a village having fun drinking beer and not doing anything. He has a mission, he goes out and accomplishes it, and we as the audience can feel satisfied by seeing him accomplish it, even if he's accomplishing a goal that is not morally correct, So we're kind of rooting for this Immortal, we're rooting for not the villain. So the villain is obviously the matriarch, and so you're kind of hoping that, maybe she doesn't achieve her goals in the end. And this Immortal doesn't really want to work for her, but he is forced to. He physically has to. He can't say no. And so we're kind of hoping that something, happens. Like, we don't want the villain to win ultimate power in the end, but it's still satisfying to see progress happen, even if it's in like a regression phase where you're like, no, I hope this doesn't keep happening, but it does. You can still track the progress through the course of the album, and that is something that's important in writing a story as well. And then when we get to the final brother in the story, in the, I think track 8, Earth and Ashes, we get to the point where we finally meet a character who is essentially a good character, and a character that we don't want the Immortal or the matriarch to kill. He's a good family man, and he's living a nice, quiet life and stuff, and, he has children, and he has a wife. Like, we don't want this guy to die, and the Immortal doesn't really want this guy to die either. But he has no choice, he has to do it. And so he, captures him, brings him back to the matriarch, and she kills him. But this is an important part in the story, because this shows a turning point in the character arc of the Immortal. So when it comes to storytelling, another thing that's kind of interesting to talk about is like how really whenever you read an effective story or experience an effective story, like if you're watching a movie, you're reading a book, you're listening to a concept album, whatever format you're doing it in, usually if it's effective and you walk away at the end thinking that was a great story, that was a great movie, whatever, it's usually because there's not only one plot going on, but there's two plots going on. So basically what you want to have happen is you want to have like an external story, which is the hero must accomplish these tasks in order to do this. That's him, rounding up all these brothers, or rounding up all these sons to bring to the matriarch. That's what's happening on the outside. And then you have a secondary storyline, which is the internal storyline, which is what is happening to the character on the inside. And so you'll treat this exactly like another plot, exactly like another full plot as well. You're going to have a climax, and you're going to have all the stuff, basically. So at this point, we really see a change in the character arc of this Immortal, where for the first time he's facing something where he doesn't want to carry out the orders, and he kind of is forced to do it because he has no choice in the matter. But he feels remorse. He feels guilty afterwards, and so whereas the Immortal started in the beginning as just this being who was just fine with going about and doing whatever he was told. You know, he's like kind of accepted his fate in a kind of like a sad, really sad way, where he was like, yeah, I just, you know, I sleep in this mountain for a little while and then I get woken up and I do a bunch of stuff for some evil people usually, and then I go back in my mountain and I go back to sleep. So at this point, he's finally reached the point where he's like, hey, you know, this is not cool, you know, I'm starting to feel guilty, I'm starting to feel remorse when it comes to killing this guy who was really just an innocent dude. So that's a huge point in his character arc, where he has to make a decision, or where he sees the results of his actions, and he starts to think, hey, you know, maybe I should start to change my thought process on this whole thing. Maybe I shouldn't just accept whatever people tell me to do and just do it. Maybe I should, I don't know, maybe try and figure out a way to fight against it or something. So that you see a change in the thought process, you see a change in his character and his mode of operation at this point. Sorry I'm talking so fast. I had caffeine this morning, which I don't ever drink coffee, but I did. And now I'm having a good 10 a.m. beer. But it's Friday, so whatever. Alright, where was I? Okay. Then we get to track 9, Call Me Immortal. So this is a point in the story where the immortal has accomplished all of his goals, and he's done all the things that the matriarch told him to do, and, you know, she had this promise that she would set him free and he wouldn't have to go back to his mountain and sleep for 1,000 years, blah, 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 blah. So he's accomplished his task, he's done everything she said, but of course she, you know, doesn't keep up her end of the bargain. She tells him, yeah, I'm done, go back to the mountain, or whatever. So Brittany explains that this character, you know, kind of saw this coming from the whole time, and he didn't really expect to be set free, but the whole prospect of, like, the little, like, tiny little nugget in the back of your brain that kind of sprouts a little bit of hope, that's like, oh, well, maybe I could be set free, even though he knows it's all a sham. He knows that she was lying from the beginning. By the time he's murdered this innocent man and kind of had that weird that little character shift where he's, like, feeling guilty about what he's done, at the same time, throughout the story, that little nugget of hope of maybe I could be set free from this curse of having to do all these things for these people over and over again. Oh shit. So I feel like he's kind of hoped that he would be set free this whole time. And so now that he knows for sure that this is not going to happen, he again is faced at a crossroads. Like, do I accept my fate, or do I, you know, decide to do something else about it? And in this instance, we see that he accepts his fate and he decides to go back to the mountain. And this is what we call, like, the all is lost moment in, you know, in the storytelling structure. This is where you bring your character to, like, a really low point, and you have them just kind of wallow in sadness for a little bit. And so he's being sent back to the mountain, and he knows he's going to go over there, and he's just going to, you know, go to sleep for a little while, and then this is probably going to start all over again, and he's just going to have to do this over and over, an endless cycle for eternity, just doing favors for really evil people. And so he decides to go back to the mountain, and so you might be thinking, like, oh, hey, shouldn't he have said, like, no, let's me duke it out with this lady and let me win, and, you know, win the day type of thing, which we all want to see him do, which, you know, we'll get there, we'll talk about that, you know, in another video, but we want to see him win over this villain. But his character arc is not quite ready for him to make that big step. You know, he's made little tiny steps on his character arc where he's finally coming to the realization that, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't just do what everyone says. Maybe I should have my own agency and my own, you know, power of will to refuse or do something about it. But he's not quite there yet. He just figured out that maybe he feels guilty about some of the things that he's doing. But to jump from feeling guilty to completely disregarding everything that he's ever done in his life, which is, you know, since the beginning of time, is too big of a leap for his character arc. So this is the, like, all is lost, like, I did everything for this lady, it was really bad, and now I've kind of created, like, a monster, and it sucks, but I guess I'll just go back to my mountain because I have no other choice. We then get to track 10, which is Apex, and this kind of just leaves us off on a cliffhanger because Brittany was explaining that, you know, he gets to his mountain, he's just kind of like, yeah, okay, I guess I'll accept my fate. But then there's something that is lurking around in the area, and he gets the sense that something is going to change or something is coming. So we leave off on a cliffhanger in the final track. And I think that's pretty ingenious considering, you know, they had planned to do a follow-up album, and so leaving off on a cliffhanger is nice because you want to then launch your audience into the desire of having the story finished, and to seeing where this character ends up, if he's going to win the day or if he's going to lose. So, yeah, so he gets to the mountain, and it's kind of like a bittersweet coming home for him, because half of him is like, hey, I kind of felt some things along this journey, and I kind of want to I kind of want to change my outlook on life. But the other half of him is like, no, play it safe, just go to sleep and dream some things, you know. So he's a little bit torn, you know. He's happy to not have to, you know, work for this evil woman anymore, but he's also like, I kind of want to do something about it, but I'm just not ready, you know. He's probably not thinking those exact words, but, you know, subconsciously somewhere, you know, he's feeling those things, and so his coming home to the mountain is very bittersweet. And another thing I wanted to talk about is like the mountain, you know, this apex mountain being sort of like a symbolic figure in this story, and that it's like the mountain implies for him like comfort and safety, and not having to be a part of the grand scheme of things as far as like history goes. Like, he goes back to his mountain and he goes to sleep for, you know, 1,000 years or whatever, and he comes back and the world is all different, and he doesn't ever have to have any like attachments to other human beings because he knows you know, he's never going to see them again. They're kind of just like little insignificant little people to him, because he knows in the scheme of time, since he's immortal, he's seen everything happen all throughout time, and so he doesn't care to get involved. He doesn't really care what his actions have on you know, history and on the people of the earth, or whatever, you know, whatever fantasy realm that this is. And so the apex mountain represents, you know, ignorance and like a cocoon of him not having to worry about what happens on the outside world. You know, he can just safely go back to his mountain, go to sleep, and dream some cool dreams. That is his like form of escapism, and so that's what the mountain represents. And then anything outside the mountain is kind of, he's vulnerable, you know, he's vulnerable to catching feelings for these humans that he meets, these people that, you know, are very brave and they believe in a lot of things, and so a lot of them are really evil, but then, you know, he sees good in some of them, like the, you know, like the last son, that we met in track 8, you know, he sees good in people, and so, you know, he kind of has to fight this inner battle of like, do I just go back to doing what I've always done, or do I try something new because I'm starting to feel something new, type of thing. And yeah, that's what is really cool about connecting two storylines. Like, usually, like I was saying, you have the external storyline of like what is physically happening on the outside, and then you have this internal storyline of like what is happening inside the character. And so when those two intersect is when you're going to have like a huge impact on the audience, and you're going to have a really cohesive story. So, leaving off on Apex, where, you know, he has this, you know, he's standing in front of this mountain, and that represents safety and not having to confront these very human feelings that he's having, is a very good place to leave off, and also very symbolic, and it also meshes together the two, you know, storylines, the, you know, the internal and external storyline that has been weaved together throughout this album. So, that is a very long, very quickly spoken review, explanation, I don't know, analysis of the story behind Unleash the Archer's album Apex. I'm really excited to talk about the follow-up album, which is Abyss, and kind of talk about, you know, the whole, how the rest of the story comes together and everything. Yeah, thank you, Max, for suggesting this album, or these two albums. I'll be doing the follow-up one here soon-ish. Can't promise when, but I know I'm going to do it soon-ish. Anyway, if you guys want to suggest other videos that you want to see from me, then go down to my Metalhead community down in the description and join my email list. It is free, it's just an email list, but from there you'll get access to like an exclusive playlist of bonus content, And then you'll also be able to suggest videos you want to see from me in the future. Again, if you want me to give you a shout out whenever I do those videos, then leave your name in that same comment when you make the suggestion. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, freaks, and make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already, and hit like and do all the sharing stuff if you want to support what I do on this channel. And also leave me comments down below. I'd love to hear your guys' impression of this, and if you are also a writer or are experienced in storytelling in any format, like a screenwriter, or just you're into, you know, stories and stuff, then leave that down in the comments. Let me know what you think of this kind of review thing that I've done. Till next time, thanks for watching.